Good morning, McGraw. Good morning, Kelly.
Hi,
How's
Tony.
everybody doing?
Your daughter is a police officer,
Yes.
and your son was a Marine.
My son's a Marine, yes.
Okay,
He's on a ship. He's on a ship right now.
so he's currently still a Marine, active. I mean.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. And your daughter, was she in the military?
No.
No. Okay.
She's been a police officer for several years in a Denver suburb.
Gotcha. And so I wanted to bring that up because we're going to talk about your column, and let's at least know where you stand and that you've got some skin in the game when it comes to military service and police conversations. Your column,
I appreciate that.
You got it. Your column on the police chief in the city of St. Louis, and they're looking for a new police chief. Probably hit a lot of raw nerves out there, didn't you?
If my Twitter feed is any barometer, I hit as many raw nerves as there might be out there on both sides of the issue. This is I don't normally run a column on Tuesday, but I was inspired to write this yesterday, and it's in today's paper, and it's one of those that people love it or they hate it.
Well, and the crux of it is that what? I mean, what are you trying to say with this column?
Well, the crux of it is that when the interim police chief says police owned the night, and when some police officers chant on the street, "Whose streets? Our streets," after arresting a bunch of bystanders, including reporters, in what is described in today's paper as using some pretty questionable and rough techniques to arrest people who weren't breaking the law and violating their constitutional rights. When that becomes the standard, then we've got a problem. And so the point of the column was it was a little bit of satire. It was the new help wanted ad for police chief, and the headline is "St. Louis seeks a new police chief, some chanting required." It's not a good look for the police, and I understand people's concern. I have been on the streets and heard some protesters and some agitators say horrible things to police, and it offends me, and I hate it, and I'm amazed at the control that a lot of police use when faced with that situation. But that's their job, and it's a tough job. And when the power of the state is using all of its power to take away civil rights, ultimately the ultimate civil rights, death, life and death of young black people on the streets, that's a problem, and that's a bad look for St. Louis. And I think the mayor's got a problem if she doesn't address it and address it quickly.
But it's nothing happens in a vacuum. These protesters have been given a place where they could go and protest, and it's not in the middle of the street, and it's not lying down in the middle of a busy intersection and disrupting traffic, and it's not giving cover to people who will then end up breaking windows of minority-owned businesses. So they're not infringing on someone's constitutional right while walking down the street going to a ball game. They find themselves in the middle of a protest for 3 or 4 days. You can certainly see how police officers, cannot protect everybody at every time at all given moments. And so if you're standing next to a bad guy or a protester in the middle of a protest or a riot, you're sort of caught up in it. Really criticizing the police in that instance?
I don't accept that argument for a variety of reasons. First of all, I'm a reporter, and I'm paid to stand next to whoever's involved in the news. I'm keeping an eye on what the police are doing. I'm keeping an eye on what the protesters are doing. In a lot of cases, when I was out at the protest Friday night, I'm merely holding up my phone and live streaming what's going on so people can see it for themselves and make a judgment. So the idea that I should be, or my colleague Mike Falk, who was, arrested simply because I'm standing next to somebody, that's ridiculous. And secondly, I interviewed a woman last night who lives downtown, who loves living downtown, who wasn't involved in the protest, who tended to be somebody who would side with police in a situation like this. She was outside 2 nights ago walking her dog with her child downtown and was intimidated by police. And you know what she did the next morning? She went to the protest. because for the first time in her life, she understood, and she was scared to death by the way the police treated her, somebody who lives downtown. So when the police chief says, we kept the street safe, he's keeping it safe for this woman who lives downtown, and she's now upset and not very happy with the police and their tactics.
But Dan Gray was trying to cover the protests, and he was, people were throwing things at him. But you don't accuse all protesters of going after reporters. So
no, and I don't accuse all police of going after reporters either.
Right, but it's a very difficult situation, a very stressful situation, and so they're not doing it 1,000% right every single second of every single moment. We need to relieve the pressure here, right? I mean, they need to be allowed to protest, but they need to be allowed to do it without destroying the town they live in.
I haven't seen anybody destroying the town that they live in. There is a huge difference, and I'm not condoning breaking windows. I'm not condoning violence, turning over planters, whatever. But there is a huge difference between breaking windows and rioting. There is a huge difference between breaking windows and destroying the town. I just think if we're going to talk about perspective, and we're going to talk about how difficult the police situation is, and it absolutely is, and they're working overtime, and they're stressed, and their families are freaking out every night until their family members get home. I get all of that, but it's not my place to tell people who are fighting for their lives and their civil rights over generations to tell them, here's how you're supposed to protest. Go do it over there and go do it this way, because based in my experience, that's what's really going to matter. The fact is, we're talking about it because what they're doing is getting our attention, and it's got the attention of the city of St. Louis because concerts are being canceled and people are losing money. That's what they're trying to do, and they've done it. And I'm not going to judge their methods. It's not my protest. It's their protest for their lives and for their civil rights. And my job is to keep an eye on the government. I am a government watchdog, and when the government steps over the line, I'm going to say something about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we could debate this for days and hours, and that's what.
And we may well be.
We may well be. Yeah. But Jason Stockley got his day in court. An independent judge ruled that what he did didn't break any rules or violate anybody's civil rights or anything like that.
No, he didn't say that. He didn't say that at all.
Well,
he didn't say that at all. What he said is that the prosecution didn't meet the burden of proof for convicting him of first-degree murder. That's what the judge said.
And he he also said that there was no evidence that he planted a gun. He said that too.
No, he said he didn't say there was no evidence that he planted a gun. He said the prosecution didn't meet the burden of proof for proving that a gun was planted.
Tony Messenger.
The judge didn't say the gun wasn't planted. The judge said the prosecution didn't meet the burden.
That is correct. But I mean, that's all not guilty verdicts, right? All not guilty verdicts are you have not proven beyond a reasonable doubt that this person did X, Y, or Z.
True, but there are not guilty verdicts in which judges or juries say that absolutely didn't happen.
Tony, we'll leave it there. Every Tuesday and Thursday with us and STLtoday.com. Tony, have a good week. Thanks.
Great.